Welcome to a tale that begins in the quiet solitude of a farmer's field, where the ordinary rhythms of life are suddenly disrupted by the extraordinary. Picture this: a 72-year-old farmer tending to his crops on what seems like just another morning until he stumbles upon something that defies explanation, a mysterious baby left behind with no clear answers. What follows is a story of secrets unearthed, lives intertwined, and a community brought together by unexpected events. As you listen, let yourself be drawn into this journey of mystery, redemption, and the unbreakable bonds of humanity. Stay with me, because sometimes the most profound stories arise from the simplest questions. Who left this child here, and why? The 72-year-old farmer Kenny got the scare of his life when he finds a mysterious baby in his fields one morning. He hasn't got the faintest idea where this child came from or what he is supposed to do next. But when he took a closer look, he noticed something that nearly makes his heart stop. He decided to call the police right away. Kenny had started thinking back to his past and all the things he had done that could come back to haunt him. But he just never expected these things to come in the shape of a baby. He really hoped the police would leave his skeletons in the closet, so to speak. But when the police arrived, they managed to quickly deduce what had happened, and Kenny knew that there was no easy way out of this for him. But why was there a baby in Kenny's field? What had the police found out? And what did Kenny's shady past have to do with this? But before we start our story, smash the like button, make sure to subscribe, and hit the notifications bell so you won't miss any new stories. Kenny wanted to take a closer look at how his crops had been doing since last week, as it had been a drier period than normal this time of year. The weather had been all over the place for the whole season, and thus the farmer was somewhat worried now. Yet he would soon have something very different to worry about. First thing Kenny saw were the familiar brown dots on the leaves of multiple of his crop types. Although this indicates stress of the plants, it could have been much worse. But there was something else that was out of the ordinary near the edge of his field, and it was starting from the nearby road. There were some mysterious tire tracks that had cursed some of the crops and were leading deeper into the field. Although the crop loss was bothersome, Kenny's mental state mostly turned into fear. He was afraid that maybe a driver from nearby had lost control and that there could be an accident somewhere. He started to follow the tire tracks that were leading towards the middle of his field. Kenny had been through quite a lot in his days, and still this whole situation made him nervous. He didn't know what he would find at the end of it, while he was mainly wondering whether this were just the young folks causing hell or something more personal. After walking for a while, he reached the top, at which Kenny could see all over his field. At the very least, he could conclude now that there was no car anywhere parked on top of his crops anymore. It would have stuck out somewhere above the crops, most likely. It was plausible that the car had taken the same way out. Kenny was relieved, mistakenly thinking that this all was probably not that serious. Maybe the youth from the village had just come in to drink a couple of beers or something. Kenny wanted to be hopeful because he realized well enough that he could be in deep trouble if it would be something personal. He followed his way, and when he got to the end of the tire tracks, at first he didn't spot anything out of the ordinary other than a handful of footprints in between the crops. He breathed a sigh of relief, but quickly halted as he noticed something that looked like it was moving a few meters away between the green. Was it an animal that was eating away his crops? He had already lost too much income due to this car shenanigan, so Kenny wanted to control damage now. He approached the movement quickly to chase the creature away. Kenny was almost there when he realized that he wasn't actually dealing with an animal. When he stood over the moving crops now and saw what had caused the strange movements, his eyes went as wide as they could possibly get. First he identified the hands, and after that the almost bald head. He could barely believe it, but there was actually a baby in his field that was looking up at him. He wanted to pick up the baby immediately, but refrained from doing this at first, since he realized that it could come on handy to make pictures of the scene. He got his phone out and extensively photographed the baby and its environment. He would surely need some evidence, as nobody would otherwise believe that this had actually happened. Kenny put his phone away quickly, but when he did come closer to attempt to pick up the baby while still being very unsure about what to do next, he saw that the child was laying on a note. He pulled the note out from under the baby and saw that the text was specifically addressed to him. Up till that point, Kenny thought he was sure that some insecure and confused teenage mother had dumped this baby on a random spot here or something like that. Kenny had heard about similar incidents on the television. But now that he saw his own name, Kenny's heart nearly stopped, as this was obviously personal. Kenny really had no idea what was coming to him. It was true that he had some skeletons in the closet, having lived a wild and long life in this rural area for a long time. He'd been afraid that something would fire back at him now. He feared that the car driving into his field had something to do with his past. And still, Kenny could not grasp at all how this baby in his field rhymed with his life of the past. There was no way that this was his own offspring. Old Kenny had not been with a woman in years, living all alone on his farm for decades now. On top of that, physically it was not possible, as he was 72 years old. He finally picked up the baby now, and with the child in his arms, Kenny realized that he had no other choice than to call the police. The reason that he was hesitant in doing this before was the fact that he had sworn never to do this again. While still sitting in his field and holding the baby between his left arm and his chest, he got out his phone again. The police officer that answered immediately sent a squad car out to him after Kenny had briefly explained the situation. Professionals were going to investigate the case, they said, which was a comforting thought for Kenny. As the police vehicles pulled up, sirens disrupting the peaceful morning, Kenny held the baby protectively. Officers clad in blue uniforms jumped out, and an elderly sergeant approached, looking astonished. "Mr. Kenny, is the child all right?" he inquired. Kenny nodded and passed the infant gently to a policewoman. "We'll need statements and pictures," said the sergeant, glancing at the tire tracks nearby. By mid-morning, Kenny's farm swarmed with reporters. Microphones pointed at him, cameras flashed, and questions poured in. "Do you know who left the baby here?" a reporter pressed. Overwhelmed, Kenny backed away. His sanctuary turned into a spectacle. After the commotion subsided, Kenny noticed footprints distinct from the tire tracks, small, possibly a woman's. He alerted the sergeant, who remarked, "Looks like the baby wasn't alone." The footprints hinted at a larger mystery. Meanwhile, the town buzzed with speculation, theories ranging from long-lost relatives to wild rumors. By late afternoon, detectives arrived, interviewing neighbors and scouring the area for clues. Sergeant Thompson informed Kenny of a missing young woman reported the previous evening. When shown her photo, Kenny felt a pang of recognition but couldn't place her. The plot thickened as connections between the baby and the missing woman emerged. In a nearby house, Margaret wept over a childhood photo of her daughter Jenna. Jenna, a vibrant 22-year-old, dreamed of becoming a musician. Despite her cheerful facade, she faced challenges as a single mother. Margaret clung to hope but feared the worst. Kenny grappled with the unfolding events, torn between helping and fearing entanglement in the investigation. Memories of his own troubles made him weary. Across town, Bill acted suspiciously, repairing his fence late at night and cleaning his mud-splattered car hastily. Once aware, his odd behavior now drew attention. Margaret visited Kenny, exhausted and clutching a photo of Jenna taken weeks before her disappearance. She confided that Jenna had been seeing someone local but refused to name him. Kenny recalled seeing Bill with Jenna at a diner a month ago. Their intense conversation now seemed ominous. The community united in search efforts, plastering Jenna's photo across town and forming search parties. At a riverside campsite, searchers found Jenna's belongings, a guitar, lyrics, and personal items. A torn cloth and signs of a struggle nearby turned the serene spot into a chilling scene. Margaret discovered Jenna's diary, revealing her daughter's feelings and a growing relationship with a mysterious man. "He listens," Jenna wrote, "but there's a darkness in him." The diary exposed Jenna's fears and hopes, deepening the enigma surrounding her disappearance. As more townspeople questioned Bill, his inconsistent answers drew attention. "I barely knew the girl," he'd claim, then casually recall a conversation with her. His nervous glances and evasive demeanor raised suspicions. Despite the lack of evidence directly linking him to Jenna's disappearance, a shopkeeper mentioned Bill buying rope and a shovel shortly before Jenna vanished. Another recalled a heated argument between Bill and Jenna outside the diner. Whispers spread and suspicion tightened around him. Kenny, reflecting on his own troubled youth, grappled with conflicting feelings about Bill's innocence. Margaret continued visiting the riverside, singing Jenna's songs and calling her name. Her determination to find Jenna never wavered, despite her diminishing hope. The town sought solace in the church, sharing regrets and theories, their collective grief uniting them. The breakthrough came when Jenna was discovered alive in an abandoned shed on the town's edge. She had survived on rainwater and the sparse food she'd packed. Margaret raced to her, and their tearful reunion brought relief to the entire community. The bond between mother and child, though tested, proved unbreakable. Attention quickly turned to Bill. A crowd gathered outside his house, accusing him of involvement in Jenna's disappearance. Cornered and defensive, Bill denied any wrongdoing. "I had nothing to do with it," he shouted, but the town remained divided, some convinced of his guilt and others standing by Jenna's account. As Jenna recovered, she revealed her struggles as a young woman feeling unheard and overwhelmed. She clarified that Bill had been a friend during her most challenging times, offering a listening ear. Their relationship, though misunderstood, had been innocent. This revelation began to shift perspectives, though not all were convinced. The community, torn between guilt and mistrust, found itself divided. Heated debates emerged in diners and homes, testing old friendships. Some rallied to help Jenna and Lisa, a struggling young mother with her own ties to Bill. Meanwhile, Kenny and Margaret formed an unexpected bond drawn together by shared experiences. They spent hours confiding in each other, finding solace in their growing friendship. Kenny, once viewed as a recluse, was now seen in a new light, his quiet integrity earning him the town's respect. Bill, burdened by guilt and regret, struggled with the weight of his secrets. Gathering the town at the community hall, Bill, with a trembling voice, began recounting his tale. Tears streamed down many faces as Bill's raw vulnerability pierced the walls of judgment that had once imprisoned him. As Lisa stood up, she painted the picture of a young woman overwhelmed and desperate. "I wanted Bill to really see our child and understand what he was turning away from," she began. She explained that leaving the baby in Kenny's field wasn't an act of abandonment, but a desperate plea, a plea for Bill to recognize the life they had created, the love that could bind them together, and the responsibilities they shared. The townspeople organized support groups, offering Lisa emotional and financial help. Bill, once the center of speculation, initiated his journey of redemption. He began with small steps, offering to babysit, attending parenting classes, and setting up a college fund for his child. Their conversations, initially filled with tears and accusations, slowly transitioned to hopeful plans and shared dreams for their child's future. Kenny's quiet resilience had made him a beacon of hope and strength, recognized as the inadvertent hero who protected a child and united a town. He was now consulted on various town matters, from organizing events to mediating disputes. His farm became a gathering spot where people came seeking advice, or simply the comfort of his presence. Kenny had transformed from a solitary farmer to the town's cherished protector. Years later, the town flourished, not just in prosperity, but in the depth of its bonds. Children played in Kenny's dedicated playground, elders narrated tales of the year that changed everything, and young couples sought advice from Lisa and Bill. Their story had become a testament to the power of love, understanding, and unity. As seasons changed and time rolled on, the community stood tall, resilient, and united forever, cherishing the lessons from their shared past.